So, picture this for a second. You are right there in the stadium. It's, the absolute pinnacle of club football, the Champions League final.
Right, the biggest stage.
Exactly. The atmosphere is just suffocating. There are exactly 90 minutes on the clock. Your team is down 1-0, and desperation is really starting to set in.
Oh yeah, panic mode.
You look over to the bench, just praying for a miracle. And there they are, waiting to be subbed on, standing shoulder to shoulder, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. And they are wearing the exact same shirt.
I mean, it's an image that genuinely just challenges the imagination. We are not talking about, bringing on a talented substitute to change a game.
Right.
We are talking about deploying the two greatest players of their generation, and honestly, perhaps the two greatest players to ever touch a football under the exact same club crest, sharing a dressing room, a training pitch, sharing, well, a singular objective.
Yeah, which is just a wild thought. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring what has to be like the ultimate sporting what if. We've got this really fascinating piece of source material guiding us through this today. It's an excerpt from the work called The Impossible Union, Messi and Ronaldo as teammates.
It's a great read.
It really is. And our mission today is to figure out what actually happens when football's most bitter rivalry dissolves into its greatest partnership. Like, does putting these two on the same pitch create the most unstoppable team in human history? Or does it, simply detonate the entire club from the inside out?
And the premise goes way beyond just a casual thought experiment. When you examine the source material, it becomes this really rigorous study of advanced football tactics, the delicate architecture of elite athletic egos, and, well, the highly volatile ecosystem of modern sports.
Yeah, it's definitely not just fantasy football.
Exactly. To understand whether this union would work, we have to look past the video game aspect and break down the brutal mechanics of how these two men actually operate.
All right, so before we could even begin to figure out how they would play together, we really need to establish the sheer scale of their dominance when they were apart.
We have to set the baseline, yeah.
The source zeroes in on a very specific, historically plausible window where they were both at the absolute height of their powers. We're talking about that peak era from 2011 to 2015. Messi is orchestrating everything at Barcelona, and Ronaldo is just, well, the ultimate weapon at Real Madrid.
Anchoring it in that specific time frame is crucial because, the numbers they produced during those 4 years just defy conventional athletic logic.
The math is staggering.
Yeah.
Seriously. If you combine their output during this window, they're scoring over 100 league goals per season.
It's absurd.
Just to give you listening some context, a classic striker who scores 20 goals in a single league campaign is widely considered world-class. Teams build statues for guys who score 20 goals a season.
Oh, absolutely.
And these two individuals are putting up over a century of goals together, year after year, in the exact same league. It is a level of production that usually requires an entire roster to achieve.
And that volume of scoring, it fundamentally warped the fabric of the sport's highest individual honors. Like, consider the Ballon d'Or.
Right, the biggest prize.
Yeah, this is an award designed to recognize the single best player on the entire planet. But over the course of this era, the award is essentially just passed back and forth between two men who have never pulled on the same training bib. Messi takes home 5 of them during this stretch, and Ronaldo claims 4.
It really makes me think of like a corporate duopoly.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Imagine if two rival mega corporations, say Apple and Microsoft, held a complete, unshakable monopoly over an entire global industry. They're the only two entities that matter.
Everyone else is just an afterthought.
Exactly. Every other company, every other brilliant engineer is just fighting for scraps, maybe like 1% of the market share, while these two giants consume absolutely all the resources, attention, and profits.
The duopoly analogy is highly accurate. And much like intense corporate rivalries, this dynamic forced the entire footballing globe to pick a side.
Oh, definitely.
That is the underlying tragedy of this peak era that the source highlights. Because they were entrenched on opposing sides of the fierce Barcelona and Real Madrid divide, the greatest era of individual talent in football history was also, the most deeply divided.
You could just sit back and enjoy a weekend of football. Every single El Clasico. Those matches where Barcelona and Real Madrid faced off, it became a cultural battleground.
It really was. It was treated as a definitive referendum. Every single time Messi and Ronaldo stepped onto the pitch against one another, the narrative wasn't about two legends competing. It was framed as a zero-sum test to prove who was the absolute best.
Yeah, someone had to lose.
Yeah. The global audience was forced to constantly argue, People felt the need to diminish one player's achievements just to elevate the others, rather than just appreciating their simultaneous greatness. The rivalry essentially demanded tribalism.
Which brings us to the core of our what if. We know the math. We understand the duopoly. Now let's merge those megacorporations. They are on the same club, playing the same system. Let's look at the argument for this union. Tactically speaking, how does this actually function on the grass?
Mechanically, their playing profiles from that 2011 to 2015 era are astonishingly complementary. If you analyze Messi's role at Barcelona during this time, he wasn't operating as a traditional number 9.
Meaning, he wasn't just the classic striker whose only job is to stand inside the penalty box, wait for someone to cross the ball, and tap it in.
Correct. Messi was frequently dropping deep. He would physically move backward, out of the attacking line, and into the midfield. He was essentially acting as the team's primary playmaker. He was pulling the strings of the entire attack, analyzing defensive shapes, and playing that killer final pass through impossibly tight spaces. The source actually notes that his assist numbers in 2011 alone rivaled the absolute best creative midfielders in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah, he is orchestrating the game while simultaneously scoring at a historic rate.
And then on the other end of that final pass, you have Cristiano Ronaldo.
The ultimate executioner. I mean, Ronaldo's mechanics in the penalty area are just peerless. He provides complete aerial dominance with a vertical leap that rivals basketball players.
It's insane to watch.
It really is. He strikes the ball with lethal precision using both his left and right foot. He has this unique ability to read the flight of the ball and arrive in the exact pocket of space where the defense is weakest.
So let's paint a picture of a transition play for the listeners. Yeah. That moment when the team wins the ball back and immediately surges forward on the counterattack.
Okay, let's set the scene.
Messi receives the ball at his feet near the center circle.
Yeah.
Because he is Lionel Messi, his mere presence creates gravity. 2, maybe 3 opposing defenders panic and immediately step up to close him down. Because if they don't, he will simply dribble past everyone.
Right, and the moment those 3 defenders step toward Messi, they vacate the space behind them. They leave a massive blind spot in the defensive line.
And making a perfectly timed diagonal sprint into that newly created blind spot is Cristiano Ronaldo.
Exactly.
Messi doesn't even need to look.
Yeah.
He knows exactly where that run is happening. He slips the ball through the gap. Ronaldo takes one touch and the ball is in the back of the net. You mathematically cannot defend that sequence.
You really can't.
If you cover Ronaldo's run, Messi walks through your midfield and scores. If you collapse on Messi, Ronaldo is left completely unmarked. It is a tactical paradox. It's like a cheat code.
It creates an unsolvable problem for any defensive structure in the world. The goals they would engineer together wouldn't just be standard highlights. They would be relentless, overwhelming sequences of combined genius. On paper, projecting those mechanics forward, you are looking at a team that arguably wins 5, 6, maybe 7 consecutive Champions League titles.
But wait, right. Because football isn't played on a spreadsheet or a tactical chalkboard. It's played by highly emotional human beings. I have to wonder if 2 players of this magnitude could actually share the spotlight without destroying each other.
That's the million-dollar question.
Although, looking at the history of the sport, we have seen players with massive profiles coexist. Take Xavi and Iniesta at Barcelona. They were the 2 most dominant midfielders of their generation, heavily praised, constantly in the spotlight, yet they seamlessly shared the midfield for years. They never seemed to trip over each other's egos.
That's a fair point. The Xavi and Iniesta example proves that superstars can share a system. But an even more direct parallel from the source material is Karim Benzema's relationship with Ronaldo at Real Madrid.
Oh, right.
Benzema was a world-class striker in his own right, but he fundamentally altered his own playing mechanics to ensure Ronaldo could thrive.
How exactly did he do that? Because changing your instinct as a striker seems incredibly difficult. I mean, you're wired to shoot.
You are. But Benzema mastered the art of the decoy run. Instead of sprinting toward the goal to score himself, Benzema would intentionally make aggressive runs into wide areas. This movement physically dragged the opposing center backs out of position.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by sacrificing his own positioning and his own shot volume, Benzema manufactured empty space inside the penalty box for Ronaldo to exploit. He became a facilitator. When an elite player is willing to suppress their own statistics for the sake of a clear tactical framework, historic results follow.
Okay, sure. Benzema was willing to make those decoy runs. But the critical difference here is that Lionel Messi is not Karim Benzema. We are moving from the tactical dream into a deeply flawed reality here. Which brings us to the argument against the union. And the source uses a brilliant phrase to explain why this implodes. Ego architecture.
Ego architecture is the perfect term. We are not talking about simple selfishness here. We are talking about the psychological foundation required to be the best in the world.
Right. You do not reach the level of Messi or Ronaldo by being a reasonable, accommodating professional who is happy to take a back seat. Both of these men have spent 15 years correctly believing that they are the single most important football player on earth, that absolute arrogance is a survival mechanism at the elite level. And cramming two people who view themselves as the absolute center of the sporting universe into one dressing room feels like an architectural collapse waiting to happen, especially when you look at the mechanics of how they actually interact with the football. We have what the source calls the one-ball problem. Yes, the one-ball problem is the tactical manifestation of their ego architecture. Consider Ronaldo's rhythm. He requires a massive volume of touches, shots, and specific responsibilities like, taking every single free kick just to maintain his flow state.
He needs that constant feedback.
Exactly. If you reduce the number of times he touches the ball, his confidence wavers, his timing gets disrupted, and his goal-scoring numbers drop. To Ronaldo, those numbers are his entire identity on the pitch. He needs the system built around his consumption of the ball. But Messi also demands the ball to function. Because Messi drops deep to orchestrate the game, he touches the ball more than almost any other outfield player. He needs to feel the rhythm of the match through constant passing and dribbling.
Yep.
So Ronaldo needs the ball at the end of the play to score, and Messi needs the ball at the beginning of the play to create.
Which sounds perfectly complementary until you realize that every time Messi decides to take a shot himself, Ronaldo is denied a touch. Every time Ronaldo demands a long pass over the top, he completely bypasses Messi's orchestration in the midfield.
Oh, I see.
They both physically need the ball to be themselves, but there is only one ball.
And it's not just a debate happening on the grass, is it? The pressure from outside the pitch would be astronomical. The source highlights the commercial war that would inevitably infect the locker room.
The sponsors.
Right. You have Nike heavily backing Ronaldo as their global icon, and Adidas doing the exact same thing with Messi. We are talking about commercial infrastructure and marketing campaigns worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And it's all predicated on their specific guy being the absolute focal point of the team.
The financial stakes alter the sporting decisions. The pressure from those corporate sponsors would be immense. Imagine a scenario where the team wins a crucial penalty kick. Both players want to take it.
Of course they do.
The sponsor backing the player who steps away from that penalty kick is losing millions in global exposure and brand equity in that single moment. Those corporate entities will actively pressure the club's board of directors, demanding that their athlete receives maximum visibility.
And clubs have fallen into absolute chaos over commercial tensions, far smaller than a Nike versus Adidas proxy war inside their own locker room.
Oh, definitely.
But surely if a club manages to sign both of them, they also hire an elite manager to handle this. Can't a brilliant manager just step in, establish clear rules, and force them to operate for the good of the team?
It seems like the logical solution, sure, but the source meticulously breaks down why that managerial role would be completely impossible. You have to factor in the reality of a grueling 8-month football season. There's natural variance in sports. Eventually, one of them will experience a bad run of form.
That's just inevitable.
When that happens, look at the media mechanics.
Right, because the media isn't going to write a nuanced piece about tactical variance. They need a click-driven headline.
Exactly. The media will instantly weaponize the other player. If Ronaldo goes 3 games without scoring, the headline isn't that Ronaldo is out of form. The headline is, Messi is intentionally ignoring Ronaldo's runs.
Wow.
If Messi struggles to dictate the midfield, the narrative becomes, Ronaldo's selfishness is suffocating Messi's creativity.
And those headlines bleed straight into the dressing room.
They do. The players read it, their agents read it, their families read it. Factions inevitably form. You would have half the squad, perhaps the Portuguese and Madrid-aligned player siding with Ronaldo, and the South American and Barcelona-aligned player siding with Messi.
It's a civil war.
We have seen...
But the source introduces a wild card here that forces us to zoom out a bit. We shift from the micro-environment of this specific team to the macro-environment of the entire sport. What does this union actually do to the future of football?
This is arguably the most profound concept raised in the text. Let's suspend our disbelief for a moment. Let's assume they figure out the ego architecture.
Okay, let's assume.
Let's assume the manager navigates the commercial pressures and they actually make it work, winning every trophy available for a decade. The source argues there is a hidden, massive casualty to that success.
We're talking about the corporate duopoly metaphor again, but on a global scale. Like how a monopoly stifles market competition and innovation. The source points to the emergence of the next generation of elite players, the guys dominating the sport today, like Kylian Mbappe, Mohamed Salah, Erling Haaland.
Right, you have to analyze the psychology of player development. Why did this current generation develop such ruthless, singular ambition?
Because there was room at the top.
Yes. The source posits that they were able to look at the landscape of world football, observe the separation between Messi at Barcelona and Ronaldo at Real Madrid, and believe that there was a tangible path upward. The mountain was steep, sure, but they could see a route to the summit. They could identify weaknesses to exploit or gaps in the market to fill.
But if Messi and Ronaldo are dominating together, if they're on the exact same team, systematically monopolizing every single Champions League title and hoarding every Ballon d'Or behind an impenetrable wall of combined talent,
Then the math changes.
yeah, that mountain doesn't just look steep anymore. It looks fundamentally unclimbable to a young player.
The psychological impact on the sports ecosystem would be chilling. A young prodigy might consciously or subconsciously cap their own ambition, basically settling for being the best of the rest because the absolute pinnacle is mathematically sealed off.
That's such a wild thought.
The greatest partnership in football history might have accidentally suppressed the next wave of greatness. By taking up all the oxygen at the summit, the GOA era would have protected its own legacy simply by leaving absolutely zero room for anyone else to thrive.
So we need to arrive at a verdict here. The source leaves us with a brilliant dichotomy to summarize this entire thought experiment. We have the clash between theoretical perfection and human reality.
It ultimately comes down to paper versus reality. On paper, purely in terms of spatial geometry and athletic mechanics, this is the most dominant sporting unit ever conceived. The tactical fit is undeniable. The goal-scoring numbers would shatter records that would stand for centuries, and you win absolutely every competition you enter.
But football isn't played on a chalkboard. It's played by real human beings operating inside incredibly complex political structures, massive corporate machines, and an ecosystem built on deep, fragile pride. Neither Messi nor Ronaldo was constructed, psychologically or commercially, to share the absolute center of the universe.
Which brings us to the core challenge the source lays out for anyone attempting to analyze this scenario.
And I want to put this directly to you, listening right now. Knowing everything we've unpacked about the tactical cheat codes and the dressing room powder kegs, if you were the one person handed this impossible managerial job, if you were tasked with balancing the Nike and Adidas money, solving the one-ball problem, and managing the media fallout, do you take the job?
Do you genuinely believe you possess the psychological toolkit required to hold that specific dressing room together?
And if you do take it, here's the ultimate tactical question. Which one of them do you build the system around? Because if there's only one ball, you eventually have to choose who gets it.
It is an impossible choice, which is exactly what makes the source material so enduring. But if we connect all of this back to the very beginning of our discussion, back to that deeply divided peak era of 2011 to 2015, I want to leave you with one final original thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We discussed how every El Clasico was a referendum, how the global football audience was forced to choose sides.
Right, the tragedy of the divided era.
But what if that division wasn't a tragedy at all? What if it was the necessary mechanical fuel for their greatness? Think about the psychology of their motivation. If they had actually joined forces, if they had become teammates and comfortably won every single trophy together without facing any real existential friction, what would have happened to their individual drive?
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
Without that bitter, dividing rivalry across the El Clasico divide, without the exhausting knowledge that the other guy was playing the very next night and actively trying to break the record you just set,
Yeah.
without that constant week after week pressure forcing them to mathematically outdo each other, would they have ever even reached those absurd 100-goal heights in the first place?
So you're suggesting that the hypothetical partnership wouldn't just have failed, it might have actually lowered their individual peaks.
Yep.
The friction between them is what created the fire. Maybe the very rivalry that kept them apart is the only thing that actually made them as great as they were.
That is a brilliant point to end on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the ultimate what-ifs. We hope you keep questioning the established narratives and exploring these kinds of fascinating alternate realities in the sports world and beyond. But for now, I want you to go back to that stadium. You were down 1-0, It is the 90th minute of the Champions League final. You look to the bench. They're both standing there in the exact same shirt, waiting for your signal. Who do you call onto the pitch?